This is Jeff Littman, General Manager of American Armory Museum, Fairfield, California. I had a chance to meet and work with all of you at the Aquino Tank Weekend in Canada. I really appreciate the time that we got to spend together. There was some concern that a lot of you didn't get to see the actual demonstration, so on Sunday I got up into the stands and videoed Alan giving the introduction and all of the reenactment activities, and we put this video together for your enjoyment.
Army, and the first tank you have, for those of you that may not recognize it, is the Russian T-54. At the end of World War II, the Russians were using a T-34 that they upgraded to a T-34-85, and then they wanted this radical new design, and that is this one, the T-54. And today, this is the most produced tank ever in history. There's over 50,000 of these produced in Russia, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. So this, in the Iraq War, this is what the regular armored corps would have. Would be this, the T-54, T-55. It's a 100mm cannon on the front. What you have is a Dishka machine gun on the top, and you're going to hear this stuff fire very shortly. What you have on the right, behind me, on my right, is a T-72. And the T-72, the number 72, went into production approximately 1972. The world first saw this in 73, 74 at the Kremlin in one of the big parades. And this was made, there was about 25 to 30,000 of T-72s made today. If you turn on your television, you'll see that the Russians are pulling these out of long-term storage and pulling them out of museums. And these are being sent to the front in Ukraine. This T-72, this is used currently by the Ukrainians and the Russians, even though it's older. But this was, when we talk about Iraq, this was used by the Republican Guards. This was the elite units that they had. And this has 125 smoothbore cannon on it. You notice it's a similar shape, but it's much lower. It's lower because they went from a 4-man crew to a 3-man crew here on that one. And that was, they put a carousel underneath where you see these crew members standing, and it brings the right amount of charge and the right projectile together and loads them both together. That was, they could get rid of a crew member, and look how low it is. It's much lower than this one. If it's lower, it's harder to hit. But it is really tight in that one. A lot more room in the T-54. But these are the main, and you're going to see these going up against the Allies, the other vehicles. This is a Land Rover, and it's about a 1990 Land Rover, and it's called the Dinky because it's smaller. It's a very small wheelbase, but this is quite common. You'll notice there's 2 machine guns back here, and you're going to hear them bark. Twin machine guns on the back. This is meant to get in and get out and be fast. All this is made of aluminum, so it's very light, and we have a machine gun on the front. And this one is crewed by Robin Craig, a good friend of mine in the museums, and he loves this vehicle. The gunner on the front, oh, that's my son-in-law. I mean, could you imagine? A father-in-law says, hey, you want to be in a military museum, and oh, you get to fire a machine gun in the front of a car. Well, needless to say, he's happy. The gentleman in the back, this is one of our Gulf War veterans. This is his son. It's a whole new generation. They came over with his father and his brother from the UK. And this is Ethan. Liam, I knew I'd screw the name up. There we go. And Liam's dying to try this. I said, do you want to try this machine? And he says, yeah, let me try this one. So we're going to see this very soon. All right, this is a different kind of vehicle. When Canada was looking at replacing the Centurions, they considered buying this. This is made in the UK, and it's a CVRT. That's Combat Vehicle Recce, because it's meant for light reconnaissance, because it's fast, and T, the CVRT, is for track. Now it's made of an aluminum magnesium alloy, so again, it's very light, and it has a Jaguar J60 engine put in right here. So it's kind of cool. That's maybe the reason why it goes as fast as it is. We have a 76, it's a low velocity cannon right above there, and with smoke detectors. We also we've got 2 veterans here. We've got John Whiffen in the front. John's a veteran who he was a corporal, and he crew commanded one of these in the Gulf. He was, and standing up top there, this is Staff Sergeant Les Critchlow, and he was the commander also. He was the troop sergeant. These guys, imagine, they've been coming over for 10 years. Not only am I the president of a tank museum, but my wife, she goes in them. What you're looking at is a 1985 Humvee. This is the first generation of Humvees. We actually acquired this in Texas from the sheriff. We had this brought up, about 8-10 years ago, and the whole, spin it around, spin the gun around. He's got it locked now. You see how that whole thing spins around? That's a live 50 cal machine gun. It's going to be firing blanks very shortly. It's a nice piece. You see the exhaust up in the air? And look at the intake here. It's also up in the air. Obviously, they could cross streams up to about that depth, and it wouldn't harm the vehicle. So this probably took part in the invasion of Panama when the Americans went in there in 1985. This is a first generation Humvee. It's armored but very, very light. All right, here we have two more CVRTs, but you'll notice they look a little different than the last one. It's the same chassis, it's the same J60 engine, but it's a different purpose. You'll notice there's a platform that's lifted up, and there's 5 missiles in there. And they're called swing fire missiles. They had a range of about 4,000 meters or 4 kilometers. And it actually, when they fired out of there, there was a spool of wire that went out behind it because it was guided, it wasn't unguided. And it could take out any main battle tank. And this took out so many during the Gulf War. Of the two that you just saw, the T-54 and the T-72. So what we have here, we have 2 veterans of the Gulf War. We've got Sean Bannister up top, and he served on this vehicle here. And beside him we have John Seeley, who also served on a striker, which we have over there on display. We didn't want to bring 2 strikers up. So both of them were over in the Gulf, and both of them have shared many, many pictures. And that's how we do them up. We get them, they're usually green, and sometimes there's trees growing out of them and stuff. We clean them up, we get them running, and we paint them the way. You'll notice there's a Welsh flag on the side. I painted that on there from an original picture, so we got it exact as we could. And then these guys come over and they see their same wagons, the same vehicles, they get all emotional because they lived in these things in the Gulf for up to 4 months. So it's quite interesting what they went through. Very. Now over here, why do we bring the 2 of them out? Here's a different variant of the CVRT. And what this is a scimitar. And you'll notice it doesn't have the big stubby gun. This has got a long, thin gun. This is a 30 millimeter high velocity Raritan. This could fire 6 shots in a row before being reloaded. And these 2 serve together. There would be roughly 4 of these in a troop, and they would go behind about 20 of these. The scimitars would act as a breaker. It would be a guard, so these guys could take out the tanks. So they go hand in hand. So what we have over here, we have Steve Baker. Give him a wave, Steve. Steve is a Gulf War veteran as well, who served in this type of vehicle. And as a crew up there, we've got Victoria Newton. Give him the wave, Victoria. Victoria's dad was an avid tank collector, and he passed away recently, and she donated the Berlin Chieftain that we have over there. That unfortunately we're not bringing it out today because it's under the weather. We got some mechanical issues, but it's the one done up in that funky urban camo over there. And so she's donated it to the museum in honor of her father, who also served. And ironically enough, birds of a feather, Victoria's boyfriend John is here. And John's an avid tank collector. So they flew over from England to be part of the show. So let's hear it for these guys.
And what do we have here? Well, this obviously isn't a CVRT. This is a massive American main battle tank. This is the M60 Patton battle tank. It was developed and deployed by the United States in 19 the 1960s and was continuously upgraded in the U.S. Army and exported to other NATO nations. The M60 was deployed with the United States Marine Corps in the 1990-1991 Gulf conflict. The Americans also had deployed for the first time their M1 Abrams, but the M60s were there with the USMC. So here we have our operational M60 Grumpy as a 105mm main weapon. Could take out any other main battle tank on the battlefield, including the T-54, 55s, or the T-72 that the Iraqis were fielding. It comes in at about 50 tons and is one of the heavier vehicles in our collection. Other than the
They're really making you walk here. I'm gonna walk there, I'm gonna walk. All right, these two are the same, and you've already seen one of them. These are Scorpions, but these are from a different regiment. You'll notice by the flag, this is from the Royal Scots. 24 Alpha is from the Royal Scots. And it's the same 76mm against CVRT. And what we have, we've got, even though it's from the Royal, we got John Scott. Give him a wave, John. Jeez, line block here. Okay, and he is the crew commander. Was the crew commander of that Berlin chieftain down there in Berlin. You got to remember, in Berlin, the Soviet Union surrounded it in West Germany, or East Germany, I'm sorry. And you had this Berlin, and it was controlled by different sectors. So they had to do that. He was the crew commander of that, and he's a Gulf War veteran. Now, what we also have is Lottie, and she comes from the Australia Armored Museum. So she flew in from Australia to help us out here. She's the driver. Lottie, give him a wave. This other gentleman is Glenn Hines, and he and I went through basic training with the Ontario Regiment a few years ago, to say the least. This last vehicle, 2-3 Alpha. This is the Queen's QRH, the Queen's Royal Hussars, if I'm saying that right? Irish Hussars. And this was, unfortunately, the gentleman's been coming here, one of the veterans, Reggie Campbell. This is his exact vehicle. And I actually, when I got it, it was totally complete and had all the proper bins on it. But in the pictures he showed me in the Gulf War, he didn't have the right bins. He had stuff whatever they could find. Like this bin here, this belongs on the back of a ferret. This is a 50 cal bin. But that's what he had on there in the Gulf War. So we took off the bad, the good stuff, and we put on the stuff that he had on. So you can imagine when he came over here to see this, and I did it all from the pictures he gave us. But what we have a friend of ours from the California, an armored division in California, armored museum, I'm sorry, Jeff, right?
Nope,
Jeff, give him a wave. He's come all the way from California. And we've got Sergeant George Clegg. Give him a... George was in the Gulf War with the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars. And if you see the big, you see the 3-4 flags up there at the very end? Queen's Dragoon Guards, my God, I'm screwing up the name. George has set up a Sultan. It's a command post. It is also a CVRT, but it's big. And he has set it up exactly the way it was in the Gulf War. And he managed his regiment in the CP like that, set up like that. So please get down there after and talk to these veterans, and they'll share a lot of stuff with you. And we have Darren Lee. He's up there, and he is from the 14th, 20th Queen's Own, or King's Hussars. Let me get that right. And he's over here as well representing. He was over in the Gulf War, and he was in the Berlin Squadron with Bob Scott down there on that chieftain. So he's been over. He's a welcome addition. One of our.
Well, we have another U.S. vehicle. This one some of you might be very familiar with. It is the ever long-serving M113 armored personnel carrier. It's not just a big aluminum metal block. This is actually meant, as you can see, for carrying troops in and out of the battle space. It has a driver, a crew commander, who will do is protect the soldiers inside from shrapnel, small arms fire.
Now this is
and
a
just give them
Ferret
that
Scout
little bit
car.
of
These came
protection.
out in 1953. Canada had about 110 of them. We have 8 or 9 Canadian ones here, and we have 2 or 3 British ones. This one was in the Gulf War with the 14th, 20th King's Hussars. This one, actually, after the war, it went back to England. It was painted green, or never went to England, sorry. It stayed in Europe, painted green. A Belgian company bought, maybe 100 of them from the British Army. They didn't need them. They come out in 53. By 1991, 92, their life in the Army had come and gone. So it sat out in the field for 15, 20 years. Rain, sun. So the green paint that covered up the tan started to fade away. We could see the markings underneath it. And the guy had it for sale in the UK. So we acquired it. And then we did the research and we found out exactly who the crew were. So we actually have inside the original driver. His name's Jim Lindsay from 35 years ago. Jim, can you come up? It's pretty tight in there, but there's Jim. It was commanded, Jim was the driver, it was commanded by a Lieutenant Joshua Rousseau Gill, that was his name. He's currently a lawyer, a very successful lawyer in London, England. He's been over here a number of times. He couldn't make it over this year. But when they first came over, they couldn't believe what they saw. They lived in this thing for up to 4 months. Slept on the side of it, on the ground with like a little thing hanging over in sleeping bags and camp cots. So some of the people get really emotional here. Now the gunner is another one of Sean Bannister's son. Now I screwed up the last one, name, so you are Ethan. This is Ethan Bannister, and again, it's down to another generation. So this is going to get ready, and we're going to see this real shortly in the reenactment that's coming up.
Iraqi forces are heading out. They don't expect any Allied forces to be in this section of the country. This green plane here, they're just in defense, just a few Iraqi infantry. But beyond that was a great desert, and it was imagined that Allied forces could never cross that desert. And now you can see the British reconnaissance units slowly creeping up. Do they even see those Iraqi soldiers? Back and alert. Here, reconnaissance moving up. And while they're moving up, that they've made contact with the Iraqis. So now the Allies know where the enemy force is. Lightly armored vehicle, they can't take a hit from the enemy, so they pop smoke and they're retreating back to their main force. But now the Iraqis are alerted. And how was it that the Allies were able to cross that great desert? Well, in 1991, there was a military technology that we now take for granted. Called GPS, and this was completely unknown to the Iraqis and was still a military secret at the time in 1991, that the Allies had used global positioning systems to cross the desert. The T-54 Iraqi tank with that dish. 413. Has been immobilized by the CBRTs. now basically a wall of Allied armor just converging on the enemy position. Now, other than the Republican Guard, most of the Iraqi forces were conscripts, and once they really got up close and engaged with the Allied forces, most of them did retreat or surrender. Okay, the Allied infantry there just mopping up. Most of the Iraqi soldiers survived the battle, but choose to surrender rather than fight for Saddam Hussein. And ladies and gentlemen, that's pretty much how the Iraqi war was won. Let's hear it for the veterans, volunteers, professional reenactors who put together this incredible show.